Right. Coming to this session then, which is in terms of digital as a support for economic growth, seems to me that what would be interesting to know would be, for example, what are the barriers and the challenges, the obstacles that are faced, and what needs to be done to make this a reality? What can we learn from the experience of others? Again, this is all about communication and sharing. So, can I please ask you to give a huge round of applause and welcome Vilas Dar, the president of the Patrick J. Mcgovern Foundation, to the stage. And I'll be back at the end of the session. Thank you.
There's no audio. We're good? Can you hear me? Well, let me start again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here with you. I'm Vilas Dar. I'm the president of the Patrick J. Mcgovern Foundation. We're a 21st, I'm still getting some notes from the audience. Can you hear me okay? Okay. We're a 21st century philanthropy. We're focused on the opportunity that technology creates, but only when coupled with human agency, with decisions that ground the dignity of communities and individuals to create a thriving, a sustainable, and equitable future. Today, we have distinguished speakers from multiple continents, from multiple sectors, to join us in discussing the contribution of digital to Africa's green growth and process. In particular, we'll look at lessons to be learned and that we've learned already about how we design a digital transformation that is sustainable by default, and how the twin transition to a green and digital economy and society will boost entrepreneurship, will create jobs, will center both economic and social opportunity, and provide new opportunities for technology innovation around climate, and create new strategies for climate adaptation, mitigation, and the circular economy. Without further ado then, let me introduce our first speaker of the day, Mr. Jérémy Pellet, Director General of Expertise France. Mr. Pellet, please.
Dear panelists, dear friends, I'm Jérémy Pellet. I'm the CEO of Expertise France, the French technical cooperation agency. I'm really happy to be there. It's a key issue, of course. We all know that digital transformation is an essential aspect for economy and sustainable development all across the world, but in particular in Africa. I'll take the recent study of IFC and Google on the potential of digital in Africa, just to remind that Africa internet economy is one of the largest overlooked investment opportunity available today. And the potential in terms of GDP is more than $180 billion in the next 5 years for the continent, according to the study. We also know that digital is a cross-cutting issue. It helps delivering on the 17 UN SDGs, and that's a core element of the global gateway for the European Union and in the African Union. For me, we have two issues which are really key to unlock the potential of digital in Africa. The first one is affordability. The second one is capital. Affordability because we need solutions that are accessible to anyone and accessible to favor the development of digital all across the continent. Capital because we need equity, we need funding to support SMEs, to support the creation of value in the sector all across the continent. So that's the reason, and by the way, we saw that in Africa, digital solutions are often adopted faster than in any other part of the world. And we saw that during the pandemic, by the way. Look at the look at the digital cash transfer programs that have been set up by Togo, for example. Look at the revenues of MTN, for example, 60% growth of revenues in data for Nigeria, for example, just for the year 2020. So that's huge. We know the challenges. We know that the African continent is still digitally divided. We know that 2/3 of the population of Africa has no access to broadband connectivity. We also know we also need to take into account the green transition. We also need to make sure that digital economy will develop together with the green the green solutions. So in that regard, our role as Team Europe, as part of the network of cooperation agencies working with Africa, is of course being here to support the African European Digital Innovation Bridge initiative, which has been launched during the EU-AU summit this year. And its aim is to foster digital innovation and establish direct and concrete partnerships through the development of digital innovation hubs. We've been working on very concrete partnerships. I will say the example of the hubs that we've been developing in the areas of climate smart agriculture, for example, in Senegal, clean tech in Tunisia, smart cities in Rwanda. And all these hubs aim at achieving food security, allowing to create opportunities and making community smarter, climate resilient, and future-proof. Moreover, under the branding of the D4D hub, and jointly with our European partners, Expertise France organized quite recently in Dakar a workshop on the use of geospatial data. More than 120 participants from all the African continent and Europe provide an insight about smart agriculture, smart cities, blue economy, and how to use the digital information from the geospatial world to develop new solutions for the continent. So such projects, such workshops, such events will not be possible without the partnership that we've been building with other agencies and actors in the continent. And this African-European approach remains essential to successfully address all the issues raised by the development of digital economy in Africa. Working in close cooperation with our African partners, we can learn from each other and develop a common approach that's really our goal to the twin transition between digital economy and green transition. And Expertise France is working and will continue to work to this end. So many thanks for the invitation. I look forward to hearing from the panel and the discussions, and I think we'll have a great time. Thank you very much.
Mr. Poulet, thank you so much for those remarks. I'm particularly inspired by a comment you shared about the things that we have to learn from the African innovation economy. Those places where we are moving faster than we ever have before and bringing innovation from multiple sectors. There's something there for all of us to learn from. With that, though, let us move then to our next speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce the second speaker of the day by video, Ms. Tanja Gunner, who is the chairwoman of the management board of GIZ, the German development agency. So with that, to Ms. Gunner.
Dear commissioners, dear colleagues, dear partners, it has been established that digital development is one of the most powerful tools for implementing Africa's Agenda 2063, the European Global Gateway, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Yet, the world faces various other transformations next to the digital one, climate change being one of the most impactful ones. There are many intersections between these two transformations that are changing all aspects of our lives. We need to look at these transformations jointly and follow the lead of CODES, the Coalition of Digital Environmental Sustainability, championed, among others, by UNEP, UNDP and Kenya. They have done splendid work in identifying the systemic shifts we jointly need to address. As implementing agency of the German and European Development Cooperation, we therefore aim to leverage the digital transformation to advance the goals of the Green Deal and the Paris Agreement, while always keeping social and economic aspects in mind. GIZ strongly supports the Team Europe effort to link and advance the green and digital transformation through the Digital for Development, or shortly D4D Hub, that was started at the end of last year. On behalf of the German government, GIZ is already implementing scalable projects in our partner countries in Africa. For example, we are working with multilateral institutions and the private sector to facilitate the setup of green data centers. We are also running a network of digital transformation centers on the continent, which supports the development of clean tech solutions to foster climate adaptation efforts of local digital ecosystems. We hope that a joint European approach on the twin transition will enable us to scale these and other successful flagship initiatives. GIZ knows climate change adaptation is already and will continue to be a key priority for African countries with profound impact on its economic growth and progress. However, when looking at the digital transformation, mitigation aspects should be addressed simultaneously, as ongoing infrastructure developments on the African continent can enable leapfrogging. The Global Gateway offers a great chance to strengthen European efforts on this, and GIZ is looking forward to work together with its European and African partners to implement concrete projects. Thank you very much for the invitation. I wish you a fruitful discussion this day.
Thank you, Ms. Gunnar, for those recorded remarks. With that, we will move now to a panel discussion. Let us bring forward expertise both from the continent, from here across Europe, to speak about these issues and to really uncover some of our practices and best lessons. If you'll join me, I'll invite our panel to come here on stage. I'll introduce you one by one. Please hold your applause to the end. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Jean-Philbert Nsingimana, the Honorary Chair of the Alliance for Affordable Internet. Sir, if you'll join us here on the stage. Second, Ms. Caroline Kamaita, the Vice President of Fixed Data Access for SES. Next, we'll have joining by video, Ms. Nanko Madu, the Director of Programs for AfriLabs. We will have with us Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, the Managing Director of the Directorate of Digitalization, Technology and Agribusiness, and the Director at UNIDO. And we'll have again by video Ms. Oninye Ikena Imeka, the General Manager of Fixed Broadcom Department at MTN. And finally, at the end, we'll hear from my new friend and young leader, Junior Tan. We'll direct some closing remarks. Junior will invite you on stage at the end of the panel. With that, let us begin. Thank you all so much. Mr. Nsingimana, let me begin with you. In 1 second here, as I pull forward my notes. You know, we've heard from our speakers here about the sustainable digitalization of Africa and the importance of making it as climate friendly as possible. But you often emphasize the need to start with providing meaningful connectivity to all Africans. Let's begin with that. Could you explain a little bit of what you mean by that term?
Thank you, Vilas. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy to be here. I'd like to make 3 points in response to your question. Meaningful connectivity, but also want to touch on affordability and inclusivity, if you don't mind. First, meaningful connectivity. We cannot accept the way connectivity is measured today. Simply counting the number of people that have been online over the last 3 months, at least once, that's not a measurement. You can't learn, you can't trade, you can't play with that kind of connectivity. So meaningful connectivity is about having regular access, a suitable device, enough data, and a fast connection. When measured in basic connectivity, for example, South Africa and Kenya will score something around 63% and 49% respectively. But when you consider meaningful connectivity, that score goes down to 13 and 11%. So we still have a long way to go to get to the meaningful connectivity targets that we have. But something about affordability. Most people are not online today simply because they cannot afford the cost of going online and the cost of staying online. The affordability target proposed by the Alliance of Affordable Internet is of 1 gigabyte for 2% of the household income monthly. So when you take that into the context of the Central African Republic, for example, you'd realize that households would need to pay a quarter of their monthly income to just buy 1 gigabyte of data. That is really a big concern. So there's some good news. However, Africa saw the greatest improvement in affordability amongst the regions studied by the Alliance for Affordable Internet last year, falling from 4.4% to 3.3%, and we wish this to continue until we reach the 2%. So finally, a point on inclusivity. Technology must work for everyone. That is not the case today. We did a research at the Alliance, and we realized it's called the cost of exclusion of women, and we realized that globally, excluding women from the digital economy has cost the world nearly 1 trillion over the last 10 years in GDP. In West Africa, last year, a collective $18 billion was lost due to the digital gender gap. So in that part of Africa, there are 2 women for every 3 men that are online. And we are all paying for leaving women behind. We just don't know it.
Thank you very much for those comments, and I particularly appreciate you lifting up inclusivity across gender, certainly across socioeconomic class. I want to come back to these points, but before we do, I'm first going to come to you, Ms. Kamaita. I would love for you to share a little bit of your philosophy on how we reach remote communities, of how we make sure that all Africans are connected, particularly where we lack access to quality connectivity today.
All right. Thanks for that question. Very good. I hope I'm audible. Okay.
You maybe speak a little louder.
Oh, a bit louder. Okay, great. So I'll start with framing the question, because the ITU statistics, and I agree with what you said about the measurement, but if we use the ITU measurement today, it says that only 29% or 30% of the African continent is connected. So 70% is not connected, and the numbers are worse than that if we take into consideration what Jean Philbert has just shared right now. And that's the problem statement. The question is, why is there no connectivity in Africa to the levels that we'd like it to be? One is, if you look a little bit deeper, a lot of the places that are left behind are very rural, remote locations. They're islands. They're places that have harsh terrain. So deployment of fiber or terrestrial infrastructure is a real challenge. And then subsequently, these are places where there's sparse population, so you don't have the populace to support commercially viable projects for the likes of maybe MTN or Airtel or Orange to go out there. There won't be any return on investment if they go and deploy connectivity in those locations. The solution is there are multiple things we need to do. So one, from a policy point of view, we call on the governments, the regulators, to put in place measures to ensure that everybody has access to connectivity. the way they need to. From a technology point of view, ourselves as SES, because our main solution that we provide the market is satellite connectivity, this is the best solution to take to these locations. Why do I say satellite is the best? Because you can deploy it anywhere, in any remote location. There have been a lot of changes in the satellite communication world, unlike a couple of years ago. There's a lot of competition in this space. We have multiple different constellations, and this is being driven by the demand. People want to have connectivity everywhere, anytime, whether you're in a cruise ship or in a rural village somewhere in the middle of nowhere, or whether you're in an island. And what satellite communication enables you to do is exactly that, be able to get a connectivity. But that's not enough. So we talk about the policy, we talk about the connectivity in terms of the technology, but we need partnerships that are solid. So we work with partnerships with the technology companies locally. We work in partnership with the communities. We've had projects in Ethiopia where we do a lot of training for the local young people to teach them how to do installations for VSAT, because then that's a life skill. That's an income generation skill, but also it's self-reliant because they're able to deploy more and more. And then there's literacy as well, because part of the reason where we struggle to cover the entire continent is that there's a lack of literacy. There's a big issue that covers everything that he talks about very eloquently, which is affordability. And this goes to the disposable income that is local. So how do we create solutions, we as the SES, together with the ecosystem of partners, to ensure that we have an affordable, reliable, sustainable solution? And we have taken on projects in different locations within Africa that try to address those issues. So if I gave all the examples, we'd be here until tomorrow. But those issues are not lost on us as an operator, and we are building the relationships locally to address that. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And as I hear both of your remarks, we're beginning to shape what the overall conversation looks like, right? It's not merely affordability or the physical reality of infrastructure, it's also digital literacy. And it's ensuring that there are resources that allow for individuals to take ownership and agency over their own digital future, right? I appreciate that. Let's move then to one of our speakers who will join us by video today. And I think we're going to change the order a little bit. And so Ms. Emeka is available? Nope. Nanko Madu?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. You know, we're going to stay here on the panel, it looks like. Never a digital panel about digital issues without some digital hiccups along the way. Bernardo, maybe we can come to you. We've spoken a lot about the contours of the reality on the ground. And yet, as we think about interventions, we particularly think about them in the context of the SDGs, of human agency and human rights. I wonder if you could share with us a little of your perspectives on these issues through those lenses.
Thank you. Thank you very much having me in the panel today. And I'm lucky to speak after Monsieur Perret and after the interventions today, because we touched already on many of the aspects. I was thinking what's left for me. But if we would have an SDG on digitalization, it would not be optimal, because it was said SDGs and digital transformation is cross-cutting. We need them for education, for job creation, so for people, for food security and many others. We need them for performance, for industry, for agribusiness, but for climate change. Yeah, I think it's fundamental to think we need this for climate change mitigation. There are many opportunities. We're working with the partners. We need to transform also the energy transition, the decarbonization of industry. This is another aspect that the digitalization will help us to achieve. So we are working in several value chains, in several industrial sectors, also working at different level, at the level of the ecosystem, at the level of the policies, but above all, we are working at the level of companies. So it is, in one word, a problem of access, and you said it through affordability, access to infrastructure. Sometimes the infrastructure is existing, but the access is minimalistic. During the pandemic, we saw kids attending school virtually because they use prepaid cards. They attend only half week because the cost is too high. It's a matter of affordability. Second, a matter of, so this is the infrastructure sometimes are there, not 5, 6G, not 4G, but there is access to some digitalization. But the second aspect, fundamental, digital skills and who can access to the digital skills. I believe in Africa, in Latin America, in many countries, there is already some preparation, but not everybody, especially women, cannot enter this access to education, access to STEAM, access at all levels. Yeah, so it means that at the end of the day, digital processes are utilized only for social media and not in relation to production. And the last element is certainly fundamental, which is the digital cooperation, yeah, the partnerships. We need to forge, and this is a fundamental aspect, that digital transformation requires innovative financing. Innovative and financing for, especially thinking of the productive sector, requires digital cooperation. So in that sense, these are, in my perspective, the main elements that we have to work. And there it was said, I would still focus much more on skills, because it is the ecosystem that will allow also that investment is attracted. And I am thinking more of companies that would like to invest in large-scale production. But skills are also needed even for small companies benefiting from e-commerce. E-commerce is another aspect that benefits smallholders, and we need to give access. So the key word is access, and we can continue giving them some concrete examples.
Thank you for those remarks. And as I hear you speak about this, your first point that digitalization really is across all of the SDGs is so powerful. And it's a good turning point as we come to our next speaker, who I think we have by Zoom, Ms. Ikenna Emeke, who's joining us from MTN. Ms. Emeke, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wonderful.
Can you
Welcome.
hear me? Thank you. Good to be here.
Ms. Emeke, I wonder if I could ask you to provide a perspective on the ground as you think about participating both from a private sector perspective, but on an issue of great social progress. Maybe you could share some comments with us first generally about what you're observing about the digital transition.
Well, I believe that the digital transformation is something that has taken over the globe, whether in Africa or in Europe. And this has been brought about even more so by the pandemic and the fact that there has been the drive to begin to realize the values of establishing a digital economy. From a private sector perspective, as an organization and a leading telco in Africa, we've consistently worked to put in place the right digital ecosystem to allow all our stakeholders to thrive, looking specifically at our continent and try to provide solutions and positioning that helps for not just digital inclusion, but also financial inclusion riding on the digital ecosystem. So it is one that we believe is here to stay, and we continue to build the right platforms, enabling platforms and operations to allow us to expand and deliver on value for the digital ecosystem.
So, thank you for that. Let's come now to a question or a set of questions more specific to the twin transition. And Mr. Nsengimana, I'm going to come to you next. One second here. So, there we go. So, we've heard a lot about the many contours and contexts and the interventions that are being taken across sectors, right? Everywhere from the United Nations all the way through to corporate actors to those who are calling for equitable access through civil society. Let's talk a little bit about the twin transition. So we are not here just to talk about digitalization, an important conversation in and of itself, but how do we take this concept of meaningful connectivity with inclusion and affordability as you've described it and make it green by default? What does that mean and how do we go through that pathway?
I think there are policies and investments choices that need to be made today to have a greener internet. And the choices that we make are going to affect the internet for the next 10 years and beyond. I'll talk about three things to make an internet that is green. Number one is to embrace the circular economy in everything digital. E-waste is unavoidable. We need to reduce, we need to reuse, and we need to recycle as much as possible. It so happens that Africa is actually doing a little bit better than most on the first two, on the reduce and reuse. And that is understood because we can't just afford to throw devices every 3 years like people here or in the US they do. Devices are really used to the maximum, and the shelf life is prolonged as long as possible. But also countries such as Rwanda, my country, has made considerable investments in capacity for recycling e-waste. So policy levers are available and just need to be used. For example, more governments can opt to incentivize the use of greener and renewable energy sources to power telecom infrastructure. The second point is about protecting people and protecting the planet while rolling out telecom infrastructure. There has to be systematic environmental impact assessments, and the findings and the recommendations of those assessments need to be applied, not just shelved. Lives and livelihoods of people and communities are at stake as we strive to connect the unconnected, and people's dignity and rights need to be upheld. Finally, I think we need to optimize and minimize the impact of telecom by sharing. And I know we have many telecom operators and satellite operators in this room. The concept of sharing is that makes economic and common sense. But it doesn't work automatically or by default. Sometimes it needs to be encouraged by policy, by economic incentives. Sometimes it needs to be mandated. I remember when I worked as minister back a few years ago in the government of Rwanda, one of the headaches I used to have was about these fiber cuts by people building roads, but also it was about the complaints about visual and magnetic pollution around telecom infrastructure. Rwanda is a very hilly place for those who have been there. So what you would see typically is 3 towers on every other hill because we had 3 telecom operators. That is 3 times the cost of connecting one area. And the cost of that rollout and deployment of telecom infrastructure, of course, gets passed on to the consumer, and that impacts negatively the affordability that we've been talking about. So to have all the 3 things by default, Vilas, ladies and gentlemen, I think first we need to encourage them through policies and economic incentives, but we should never hesitate to do the right thing through legislation and regulation. So carrot first, but if necessary, some stick as well. Thank you.
Well, I very much appreciate that framing. And I appreciate your call that this is a holistic response that's necessary, right? It comes certainly through regulation, but it comes through how the private sector responds and how civil society sustains that kind of transformation. With that, maybe, Ms. Kamaita, let me come back to you. There's been a call here for strong regulation, but along with it, financial incentives. Maybe you could speak a little bit to how you see the private sector responding to these financial incentives and the ways that you're thinking about shepherding both a digital and a climate transformation through your work.
Right. Thanks for that question. So when we look at digital and the twin transition, right? So we talk about digital and we talk about going green. In Africa, that's can be a little bit of a challenge in the sense that if you go by the statistics I shared earlier, that in the digital space, we are still grappling with the issue of coverage and connectivity. But with that challenge, I think it's the right time because then we can get it right. Because based on what he's saying, we don't have to go now and do 3 towers. We can do 1 tower and be able to build on that. And one thing we're doing as an organization is building partnerships within the different countries in Africa, specifically to build shareable infrastructure. So we are building gateways. We have a new satellite constellation that we are currently building. This is what we call O3B Power. It's a low latency satellite with very high throughput. And we've thought about how do we do this right? How do we get it right? How do we ensure that it's affordable? How do we ensure that as many people are getting the coverage that they need? And so we are working with local partners. We are putting a singular gateway in a location, for example. We're inviting all the telecom operators, and we're trying to change the conversation from I need to own my own infrastructure to I'm going to give you an SLA, because at the end of the day, you want the guarantee that you have a certain throughput, the guarantee that your downtime is limited. And we are shifting, even from a commercial point of view, our conversations are less and less on let's go build as much as we can and fill the place with masts and stuff like that, but let's have the conversation around what do you really need as MTN, what do you really need as Airtel? Can I deliver that in the most cost efficient, in the most effective way, working with the local regulator, working with the local communities? So that's one point. The next point in terms of how we see the financial instruments, So we're talking about going digital. One of the biggest needs in Africa right now is access to capital. I think there's one gentleman who introduced and said very eloquently that there's a need for capital because we need to be able to invest. But when we talk about going green and going digital in the twin transition, the key thing is being able to invest also in research and development. We need to fund innovation. Innovation comes at a cost. We need to be able to take the nice innovation that we've seen in Africa and a lot of places around financial services, mobile money payments, M-Pesa, as it's well known. We need to be able to scale, but for that to scale, we need access to financing. So when finances are available, we're having now those differentiated conversations around, it's not just let's go build another cable, let's go build this other thing. It's about how do we utilize this financing in the place where it's most needed for the greatest impact possible. And there are different conversations from conversations we had a few years ago. There are different conversations because of COVID and the demand for connectivity, the thirst and the hunger for connectivity that has brought up, and the innovation that has come out of the pandemic as far as digitalization is concerned. So a lot of great conversations in that space. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think as you speak about access to capital and technology innovation, I'll maybe bring a perspective that comes from civil society. We serve both as a funder and a partner to many of the organizations that are doing this work. And we find this repeated over and over again, that innovation actually is happening on the ground as a response to local circumstance. But translating that into the kind of systemic innovation that allows for addressing millions or billions of people requires a capital stack that includes civil society and funders, but very quickly has to go back to private sector research and development investment and the kind of financial structures that governments can provide in order to ensure that these innovations are scaled appropriately. Is that right? Yeah, very good. We have a little bit of time here, and as we go through a few more questions with our speakers, I'll also invite all of you in the audience to consider some questions that you might want to ask of our panel. We'll come to you in about 10 minutes and ask you to share your thoughts and to ask questions of us, so be prepared. But now let's maybe continue this conversation about private sector action. Ms. Ikena Emeke, are you still available and with us? Mecca?
Yes, I'm with you.
Ah, yes, wonderful. And sorry, let me pull my headphones here as well. Very good. So, Ms. Emeka, we've heard a little bit here about European innovation and how they might support best organizations like MTN. But you have, as a company, launched an eco-responsibility initiative. You've committed to environmental impact in your work, and you've committed to net zero. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit more about those initiatives and how you view climate responsibility in the context of the delivery of services to your many constituents.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Vilas, for that question. Absolutely, sustainability is a core value for the MTN Group. For us, it's about creating and protecting the shared value for ourselves and for all our stakeholders. And we achieve this through responsible economic, environmental, and social practices. It really is at the heart of what we do. Now, it's also an area that is very central to our ESG strategy. Like you mentioned, we've launched our core eco-responsibility initiative, which has, of course, committed us to reducing our environmental impact in terms of materials and resources used, especially in the area of waste. We've also committed ourselves to a net zero carbon emission level by 2040. You would agree with me that that is a very tall one, but it's something that we are very committed to achieving. We also are working across platforms such as the UN Global Impact Compact, which is the only private sector-driven agency of the UN focused on attaining the SDGs using the 10 principles. So this is a group that we are very committed to working with. Again, speaking specifically to the twin transition efforts. In terms of energy, we are making concerted efforts to move towards green energy. We are reducing greatly our reliance on diesel and generators. As you are aware, Africa is a growing and emerging continent. So there's quite a lot to be done in terms of infrastructural buildup. So that it presents a bit of a challenge from a resource perspective. However, it is something we are committed to, and we are currently focusing on hybrid energy resources as a way of, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. Now, some of the things we've done is the build out of our independent power projects, which again has helped us in that regard to minimize the environmental hazards that come through the alternative energy solutions. It's a journey because of the infrastructural challenges that really is obtainable in the markets that we operate in. And these challenges are especially within the power sector, where the lack of reliable power sources is a problem. And when you think about the fact that Africa is a youthful population, a growing population, it presents a second challenge, which is the labor migration. And if we are not able to effectively start to put in place the right types of green solutions that will help us to maximize the ability of our continent to provide for renewable energy, it would continue to be a problem. So what do we believe should be some of the things that can be done? We believe that there's an opportunity, and we consistently find partnerships and alliances that we can work with to help us to drive these initiatives. We also believe that people, organizations, and platforms like the ILO can help also in trying to put in place the right labor laws that allow for interventions into Africa from the first, from the European countries, bringing in talent partnerships and exchanges. For example, you have the African Development Bank, and one of their key 5 priority projects is access to energy, which they've called the New Deal on Energy for Africa. This presents an opportunity, for partnership with the EU in terms of financing and capacity building, as well as supporting the green transition. Now, we see this as a commitment that we've made and something that we intend to focus on as an organization. As a leading telco, we believe that everyone deserves the benefits of a modern and connected life. And we aim to provide meaningful connectivity and services to all our customers, and to be a good corporate citizen in all the markets that we operate in. Our belief is expressed through our ambition, the Ambition 2025, which is targeted at providing leading digital solutions for Africa's progress. So we are very focused on building an enabling digital ecosystem and connectivity operations, which are driven by sustainable eco-responsible initiatives to enable the growth of businesses across all our markets.
Well, I'm quite inspired in hearing your comments to know that the private sector is stepping into these challenges in the ways that you described them. But let's also acknowledge that the civil society sector should have a voice here, and I'm going to invite in Nanko Madhu to join us in just one moment. Nanko is the a director at the AfriLabs, and Nanko, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Nanko, we've been having a robust conversation today about the context of both digitalization and climate sustainable interventions that allow for us to both connect and sustain an economic future. I know that your work at AfriLabs speaks directly to many of these points, particularly through the lens of how we build a generation of talent that is connected, that is capable of driving innovation and of transforming economies. Let me ask you quite an open question as you join us. What are your perspectives on the twin revolution, and where do you think we should be putting our focus?
Okay, so definitely to thank you for asking the question, and thanks for having me on the panel. So to advance Africa's digitalization and harness the power of technology for green impact, we have to strongly support entrepreneurship and innovation, particularly at the grassroots level, right? Support should include financing and technical assistance for green business models as a critical factor to encourage entrepreneurs to think green and digital together. In this regard, we've carried out a number of programs that fosters the green and digital. For example, we work with GIZ and other partners to support over 30 innovators across Africa in clean tech, smart housing, as well as smart mobility, by providing acceleration and technical support in the form of coaching and mentorship, as well as a platform for investment opportunities. And this is our way of just building sustainable ecosystem for the clean tech and smart housing in Africa, which directly contributes to the green sectors, as well as leverages on digital technology. So I'll pause there. But before I do, I also want to touch on the topic of decentralized growth, which we think is critical to the digitalization conversation. Decentralization fosters the capacity for innovators and entrepreneurship to achieve a variety of interrelated social economic objectives, particularly on the African economy. And so as an organization, one of the things that we've seen that works for the SME the SME ecosystem is just to thrive and push for decentralization. We've achieved this by implementing a quota system for most of our programs to create more opportunities and programs for cities and ecosystems that are outside of big cities. These cities are usually not prioritized in programs and funding opportunities. And by doing so, we're tackling brain drain and we're bringing innovation to more remote communities, which are then able to tackle their local environmental and social challenges with the help of ICT. 2 weeks ago, our team was in Arua, Uganda, a very remote community in Uganda, supporting, the rural communities to come up with digitized ways of tackling, challenges around farming, water pollution and the likes. We've also, in our own way, under our capacity building program, held physical workshops, and in holding those physical workshops to support hubs that further support SMEs, we prioritize the minority cities and communities. We've seen the importance of building strong networks in marginalized communities, and so we're partnering with an organization in Kenya called the Countrywide Innovation Network. And this organization focuses, on supporting rural ventures and innovation that can typically will not receive, support from funding organizations or programs. We've worked with partners under the Africa challenges and have accessed and implemented funds from the Canadian government to identify, fund and support offline innovators. And by offline, we mean, innovators that have no digital presence. They have no digital presence and they have no digital component to their innovation. So driving that, presenting the benefits of digitization to them in their efforts to solve problems around the green areas. So you're dealing with the green tech and as well dealing with green challenges around the green space, and at the same time, infusing technology and digitization into it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that perspective. We've heard again and again the importance of innovation, but I think what you've shared with us is that innovation has to happen at all levels. It's not merely technical innovation at our kind of large private sector corporates, but also SMEs, and engaging our communities in a conversation about the kinds of technologies and interventions we want to develop. Thank you for that. We'll come now, Bernardo, to you. You have at UNIDO for many years led interventions to support industrial development with technology and digitalization. But you also serve as a steward of the Paris Climate Agreement, of the SDGs. And I think you are beginning to see examples where these two forces are truly converging, where opportunities are arising at the intersection of digitalization and sustainability. I wonder if there are some examples you might share with us from your work of where you're seeing successful interventions on these topics.
Thank you so much for the question, and this brings us to the digital twins. And indeed, but when we are talking about how these digital twins can make impact, we need to unpack the technologies. We need to talk, are we talking about artificial intelligence, cloud computing, drones, about 3D printing, and we have a number of excellent examples. We were partner in the e-waste in Rwanda. We have been accompanying also the wonderful creativity in Togo of a gentleman that started to produce 3D printers out of e-waste. But we were working in geothermal optimization in Kenya through Internet of Things. But maybe today the example I would like to bring is the environmental challenges that were brought about by the environmental invasion of a bush, an invasive species in Namibia. So they have the savanna, and this bush started to take the land of farming and crops and invade it completely. So we were asked to make a better meal out of this, and when we were producing the meal for the debushing, and the debushing optimizing the debushed flour for animal feed, which improved the cattle growing, but we started with a, let's say, economic aspect there. But the more we went, we said we can have other alternative technologies, and we produced and we got a new technology for the charcoal zero emission. Yeah, and we used also solar panels, and we produced charcoal. And then the idea came that the bush, the invading bush, is not going in a similar way everywhere. We wanted to help the debushers to see where they can best crop. So we utilized drones to help them to know the texture and where it is. And we link the drones then to satellite. So we have the satellite picture, we have the drones, and we were helping the debushing, and then using in an economic way the product. But the link to the climate is, first of all, we're challenging the environmental problem of having this bush, the invasive bush, but also the problem of water. This bush goes 25 meters down the earth and takes all the water away and is creating a problem of biodiversity. So in this case, we see that you have the drones, you have the artificial intelligence, because out of the data you gain from the picture, you start optimizing. We even created in the framework of this project an application an app for the debushers to check immediately where they can debush better. So you have here different technologies that are being applied, and you have to look at it in a holistic manner. This example shows you that the potential is extremely big. And certainly, I would like to add, to finalize, we have the potential to make it scaling up, especially in the framework of the circular economy. The circular economy brings a lot of opportunities to digitalize, to bring these new technologies at each stage of the value chain. And the circular economy also requires a redesign, new thinking of how we produce. So we have another opportunity there. But in all of this, I repeat what I said before, we need more cooperation, we need more partnership, we need to bring the public and the private sector closer together, and this was the case in Namibia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Calzadilla Sarmiento. I want to celebrate what I've heard from every speaker on this panel, which is an optimism that we face significant decisions to be made about how this twin transition happens, but the power and opportunity of these tools to create new economic opportunity. With that, I'm delighted to introduce Junior Tan. Junior is a very special speaker today. Junior, why don't you join us here on stage as I introduce you? You're a Franco-Cameroonian working as a big data engineer, an entrepreneur. You represent a public policy incubator where you work to use digital technology to make public policy accessible to all. You bring an important generational voice, but also a technical one. Junior, maybe let me turn it over to you to share some thoughts and maybe even a provocation with us and with the crowd.
Yeah, thanks Vilas, thanks everyone to be here. I will switch to French. Alors, je remercie tout le monde d'être ici présentement. Je suis très honoré de représenter ici mon pays, l'association où je gère des projets digitaux qui s'appelle Je m'engage pour l'Afrique, et de me représenter moi-même. Comme Vilas l'a dit, je m'appelle Taïon Junior, je suis data engineer et je travaille dans l'industrie de la data à Paris, où je suis basé. Engagé dans le développement digital de l'Afrique, en 2019, ayant rencontré plusieurs personnes, des amis qui gèrent des business, principalement au Cameroun, ont eu beaucoup de difficultés. C'est ainsi que nous, derrière, avec quelques d'autres amis, nous avons créé une agence digitale ayant pour but d'accompagner ces chefs d'entreprise-là, voilà, qui entendent parler du digital mais qui ne savent rien au fond, en fait, finalement. Donc le but, c'était de pouvoir aider à passer sur le e-commerce, comme l'un des panélistes ici a parlé tout à l'heure, pour pouvoir, voilà, améliorer leurs revenus. Aujourd'hui, avec Je m'engage pour l'Afrique, on travaille à créer des nouveaux ponts entre nos deux continents. Parce qu'étant de la diaspora, mon cœur est au Cameroun. Malgré le fait que j'habite en France, j'essaye de trouver comment, voilà, cette coopération-là peut s'améliorer. Monsieur Jérémy l'a dit au début du panel, que l'industrie de la data et du digital va très vite. Mais malheureusement, on constate que dans certaines régions du monde, il existe encore des endroits où il y a une grosse fracture. C'est vraiment difficile en fait. Selon la Banque mondiale, il y a environ 75% de la région africaine qui ont accès normalement à Internet mobile, mais on constate qu'il y a juste 25% de la population qui l'utilise réellement. Et parmi ces 25%, la grosse majorité vient des zones urbanisées, c'est-à-dire les personnes qui viennent des zones rurales sont un peu délaissées. Le but maintenant pour nous, et pour les chers panélistes ici, c'est de pouvoir trouver, voilà, comment améliorer l'accès à Internet ou bien améliorer l'utilisation Internet à ces personnes-là. L'un des points sur lesquels j'ai envie de rebondir là maintenant, c'est les jeunes entrepreneurs. Les jeunes entrepreneurs, on entend beaucoup parler. Aujourd'hui, ils sont des génies qui créent des entreprises en Afrique et tout. Mais ils font face à plusieurs difficultés. L'une des difficultés, c'est l'accès aux finances. La deuxième grosse difficulté, c'est une vraie stratégie gouvernementale pour accompagner ces jeunes entrepreneurs-là. Alors, j'aimerais poser deux questions à nos panélistes, principalement ceux des grosses entreprises, ceux qui ont des gros impacts sur le continent. Est-ce que vous faites assez pour pouvoir aider ces jeunes entrepreneurs-là en termes d'accompagnement. Quand je parle d'accompagnement, on va me dire il y a des incubateurs, mais ces incubateurs-là sont privés. Ça veut dire, moi, aujourd'hui, jeune entrepreneur camerounais, si je suis basé au Cameroun, avec $15 environ par jour, je ne peux pas me payer le temps d'un espace de coworking pour bosser. Donc, est-ce que vous faites assez? Est-ce que vous trouvez que vous faites assez pour cela? Et la deuxième question sur laquelle je vais rebondir pour finir, c'est est-ce que vous avez des plans au niveau stratégique, c'est-à-dire avec des gouvernements, peut-être, pour les accompagner dans ces choses-là, dans cette transformation-là? Et est-ce que vous avez aussi des plans au niveau un peu macroéconomique pour ces jeunes entrepreneurs-là? Merci.
I knew, Junior, that you would ask the right questions. I'll come to our panel, and I believe that Ms. Mado is also with us still on Zoom. But maybe I will start with you, Ms. Kameta. As you think about supporting youth entrepreneurship through the inclusive lens that Junior has framed, how do you think about this work?
So thank you, Junior. I think that was absolutely delightful listening to you. We can do more. I know we do what we can, especially working through the local communities or working with local partners, but there is always room to do more. And what I would like to take out of this panel is to go pose that question internally and see where can we do more. In terms of what we do, so we've done a lot of training sessions where we call the local partners. The one I have a good reference for is in Ethiopia. We trained, I believe, more than 500 young people, trained them on how to do installations, equip them, give them a set of tools, and when we have projects, then we go back to them and say, guys, you're trained, you're certified, please come and do this project with us. So we try as much as possible to get involved in that level of engagement, yeah. But we can do more.
Jean-Philbert, would you like to come in, maybe short interventions here?
Yeah, absolutely. The question was asked to the corporates. I'm not in the corporate world, but I know something about it. But I will also comment from the perspective of government, because I think the question that Junior asked is about how do we activate an ecosystem approach to supporting entrepreneurship. And definitely agree with you, Caroline, that the private sector can do more. One thing that I can suggest as you take this suggestion back to the company is just provide internships. Provide to those guys you train, give them slots, give them places they can sit, and pay them, and pay them well, but then give them exposure. I think most of the entrepreneurs, those who are starting, they come without any kind of management leadership experience, and being in an environment where this is practiced makes a lot of difference. And if every company, depending on the size of your staff, would say, for every 50 staff, we'll take on permanent basis and rotational basis one intern, that would make a big difference in helping the young people who are trying to break through the cycle. Now, from the government, quickly, I would say, government, for the ecosystem to come together and mature, you can let it happen organically, but it takes too long. So governments have an opportunity to use the convening power to bring the 5 corners of this ecosystem: the corporate, the entrepreneurs, the academia, the civil society, and the entrepreneurs themselves, to come together and pose those questions live. I'm sure in Cameroon there could be those kind of platforms, but it's never enough. It could happen once a year. It has to be a permanent dialogue, and the government can use that convening power to bring together those 4 pillars and make ecosystems evolve much more rapidly. Thank you.
Thank you. We're quickly coming to the end of our panel, but I'm going to ask each of our speakers to provide 1 sentence and 1 sentence only on this topic, a tweet-worthy sentence, if you will. As you think about that, let me say one last thing, Junior, in response to your question, which is I often find that building these ecosystems is not about the intent of corporates or government or civil society. Instead, it starts first from listening, from spotting what young people are saying that they want to create, and ensuring that we open up resources to allow for truly inclusive development. With that, maybe I'll come to each of the panel members, 1 sentence, and if you have a Twitter handle that you want to share, go for it. Each of you has 10 seconds. Would you like to begin?
Yes, I will. 1 sentence. So together we can do it.
Jean-Philbert?
Meaningful connectivity is the answer.
It is about bridging the gaps, connecting the dots, but especially something very pedestrian, which is we need to articulate better the stakeholders.
Amazing. Junior?
Yeah, I will say it also in French. Nous devons penser à une stratégie digitale inclusive.
Fantastic. Do we have Nanko? Or Ms. Ameku, please.
Yes, I'm here, and I would say continuous creation of value for digital inclusion.
Wonderful. And I will just share with you that the twin revolution requires us to focus on human agency. With that, we come to the end of our time. Thank you to our incredible panel, our speakers, and our interventions. It's exciting to be here for the European Development Days. And for those who would like to continue the conversation, we'll be moving to D22 in the other hall for the D for D Development Hub. I think I got that pretty close, but this gentleman here in the front will be taking us. Thank you to the audience. Thank you again to our panel. Let's continue the conversation.
Well, thank you, Vilas. That was a fantastic session, and thank you to all the panelists, real and virtual. What do I take away from this? Well, many things, in fact. But meaningful connectivity is something that really resonated with me. And meaningful connectivity means not only is the infrastructure present and there, but also it has to be affordable. I've lived in Africa, so I know what the issues are, and you know, for many people, even just a simple mobile phone connection is beyond what they can reach for. And that example of a quarter of your salary for 1 gigabyte of data just really socked it home to me. That was a great kickoff to today's work in Studio 2. I think what I'm going to do now is let you go for lunch because everybody looks a bit hungry. I think I want to tell you about the catering. There are food trucks between Palais 7 and Palais 11, where we are now, where you can buy something for lunch. There are coffee corners where you can get tea and coffee, and there are water fountains around the place if you get thirsty. Also, don't forget that today there is a health policy forum from 12 o'clock until 4 o'clock until 16:05 in Auditorium 500. It'll be looking at the Global Health Policy Forum, which will influence the EU's global health strategy. So if you want to share your thoughts there, please do so. The next session in here will be at 13:40, and that will be on startups as a tool for empowerment and job creation. Go and enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much for your time, and see you very soon. Thank you.